providing insight and resources for your spiritual journey. Unity Online Radio.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together we are unity.
Welcome to Discovering Eric Butterworth with Reverend Tom Thorpe from Unity Institute's Spiritual Education and Enrichment Faculty. If you want to be inspired by clear, powerful truth teaching, or if you have questions about what Eric Butterworth teaches, or how you can apply his teachings to your life, please keep listening as Tom and his guests explore the exciting message of this great New Thought minister, teacher, and author.
I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to another edition of Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. It's just you and me this week, and we have a really important subject to explore. Actually, today's the beginning of a series where we're going to look at thinking. Eric Butterworth has some really, really powerful things to say about thinking, and we're going to explore them in depth over the next several broadcasts. We do know that the power of thought is our greatest God-given power, because by thought we can change our world. That's something that is easy to say, and as you'll hear from the audio clips we're going to be listening to today, it's quite a bit more difficult to actually do. So let's hear our introductory clip where we listen to Eric Butterworth discuss what thinking actually is.
It is rare in education that we're introduced to the process of how to think. The mind is dealt with for the most part as a fact collector and a word dispenser. And this is so true in the study of metaphysics. That we're told that we're thinking creatures, we're mental beings, and therefore the important thing is you must think this, you must think that, you must think the other. So we're constantly building in and programming our mind with affirmations and techniques and treatments and so forth, and learning to verbally repeat them and picture them in the words that we express. Thought for the average person is a reflex process. In other words, things happen and we react in thought. We become worried, we become fearful, we become concerned and anxious, or on the other hand, we become happy and inspired. And we assume, and this assumption is almost universally prevalent among people, we assume that the thoughts that we think are produced by the circumstances that we experience. And that mind is something that we hold within our skull by which we can deal with the world out there. Things happen and we react, we think, and we say, well, of course I'm upset. You'd be upset too if you had the same experiences. Life is a continuous reaction to outside stimuli to the average person. So one may be happy or sad, or life has meaning or is meaningless by evidence of what happens to us from day to day. We may even sometimes check the weather, or consult the stock market returns, or even go to a doctor to see how we feel. Ask the average person, how do you feel today? I don't know. I have to wait till I get down to the office to see what kind of a mood the boss is in. Then I'll know how I feel. But experiences do not cause thoughts. Emphasize, experiences do not cause thoughts. Someone may do something to you, and he may give you a perfect opportunity to be upset if you want to be upset. But if you don't want to be upset, you needn't be upset, you see. The incident happens. There's no use denying it. It's not saying that he didn't say it or it didn't happen or they're not doing these things in the world out there. They've happened, and it becomes history once it's happened. But as far as your experience is concerned, the incident is completely external. It's always on the outside. What happens in your mind happens as a result of your attitudes and your feelings and your habit patterns. Your mind is your domain. Now this is fundamental, and these words are easy to express, but it's so important to get this into our consciousness. You think what you want to think, or you think what you have habitually thought by a certain tendency of habit patterns. Your thoughts are your reactions to the incident, always. The incident did not make the thought. It is your mind, and you have been thinking and reacting in thought according to the level of your consciousness.
The incident did not make the thought. Now, that's a thought that I really want us all to look at. Eric talks about the difference between reactive or reflexive thinking and creative thinking. How often have you and I allowed ourselves to be tossed about by whatever is going on? It's fascinating in a way how we let external events direct our thoughts, when in fact we don't have to do this. It's not something that's hardwired into us. It's learned behavior. In the first chapter of Genesis, we read that God says, "Let us create humankind in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion." Now, what is dominion? Well, it's a combination of authority and responsibility. Someone who has dominion is in charge. She or he knows that they're the executive director of their lives. Now, how often do all of us know this? How often do we know, how often do we remember that we are in charge of what we're thinking? It isn't as though somebody could tell us what to think and have us automatically obey. But that's what happens too much of the time, because we have forgotten that we are the executive directors. So Eric is laying out a challenge right here in our first audio clip for this broadcast. He's telling us that we do not have to be controlled by outer events, by others' opinions, or even by what somebody else tells us we absolutely, positively have to do. Just imagine that. Imagine the freedom that comes when we really get that we are in charge. Now, I'll bet that all of us have had that awareness, but we haven't had it all the time. There have been times when you and I were clearly able to chart our own course, even though people around us were being swayed by public opinion. You know, in the Holy Week story, Easter has just passed. We have Jesus riding into Jerusalem on Sunday, and whether or not that happened is not all that important, really. We have Jesus riding into Jerusalem on Sunday to the hosannas of the crowd. And then 5 days later, if we're to believe the same gospel stories, the same crowd is yelling, "Crucify him." The rabbis, the Pharisees, are asking him to please, get your followers to tone it down. And he said, they're going to do what they do. If I silence them, even the stones would praise God, Jesus says. And the crowd was influenced by what they had heard, what they believed about Jesus. The same crowd just a few days later is looking at a very different feeling, a very different emotion. The same crowd is yelling, "Crucify him." They're totally swayed by external events. Do you see how that ability to sway others can give a person tremendous power? And that ability to sway others comes only from the consent, whether or not it's conscious, of the people who are being swayed. We see it in the political arena all the time as one candidate tries to manipulate the audience and another tries to manipulate the electorate, I should say, in a different direction. We see it on TV all the time as they try to sell us various products and services that we absolutely, positively can't live without. But recognize that the thoughts, the incidents, the outer incidents, do not cause our thoughts. We cause our thoughts. We make a decision what to think, whether or not we are consciously aware of it. Just stop and ponder that for a moment. If you're feeling very happy right now, and I hope you are listening to Discovering Eric Butterworth, if you're feeling very happy it's because you chose to be happy. If you're feeling sad, yeah, it's because you chose to be sad. Now, something horrible might be going on in your life. I don't want to minimize that. And that terrible thing may be painful. The choice is yours whether to stay in the pain. You can, if you will, through your executive power of thought, move beyond it. This is a tremendous challenge Eric Butterworth is giving us. And I know, because I knew him slightly, that he rose to that challenge himself most of the time. And there's the rub, you see, because none of us has yet achieved that total Christ consciousness where we are so totally above the limitations of personality that we can say we have no challenges anymore. This decision to control our thinking, to make up our own mind as to what thoughts we'll entertain and what thoughts will be put off, this decision has to be made many times every day. And the temptation is strong, isn't it, to just let go and be swayed. But you and I know that there's the power in us that is stronger than that, and that power is called dominion. And by working with our God-given dominion, we can rise to a new level of consciousness. The choice is really ours. We'll be listening to more of Eric Butterworth and, of course, more of our own comments, my own comments today, when we return from this short break on Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio.
I am unity. You are unity. We are unity.
If you've been inspired by the programming on Unity Online Radio, we hope you'll give your support so others may be inspired too. This online radio network depends on the love offerings of listeners to continue operating and expand its outreach. Please visit www.unity.fm and click on Donate Now. Thank you.
Even if you're a seasoned spiritual student, even if you've been on a spiritual journey for a long time, how's your life working? Knowing spiritual principles isn't enough. We have to practice them every day. Join Reverend Ellen Davenport and co-host Laura Shepard on Absolute Living as they talk each week about putting principles into action in every decision we make.
I'm one with you. You're one with me. Together we are unity.
We now return to Discovering Eric Butterworth with host Tom Thorpe.
Welcome back to Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. I'm Tom Thorpe, and it's just you and me for this edition of Discovering Eric Butterworth. I invite your comments by email, and I certainly want to hear your thoughts about Eric Butterworth's views on thinking. This is the point in our program where I like to thank you for your support. The very fact that you're listening right now proves that you are supporting this program. And by downloading our podcasts, by sharing them with your friends, you increase your level of support. And then, of course, there's the financial level of support, which we do so appreciate. It allows us to continue our programming and even to expand it. Donating is easy to do. All you need to do really is go to www.unity.fm and hit the donate button. We will be so grateful. I also want to thank our engineer, our program director, really, Jeff Comfort, who keeps things on the air and keeps us on schedule, and, as I like to tell people, makes our sound the equivalent of any radio broadcast I hear anywhere. And you may remember from last week that we're asking you for we're asking you for some information, for some input. We are looking at the possibility of a Unity online radio conference at Unity Village that would be held from October 21st to October 23rd, 2011. That's a Friday through a Sunday, and you're invited. The conference would provide hosts and listeners an opportunity to connect in person through receptions, dinners, workshops, and what we're calling a host mashup. The host mashup is an interesting idea where we pick a selection of hosts and a selection of questions and have each host have a go at the question. Before we move forward with a plan, though, we want to know how interested you are in this idea. Are you interested in a conference? And if so, what would be most important to you about the conference? We really want to create an experience for the listeners, and so we've created a survey to get your feedback. And you can go to www.unity.fm and click on the blue survey button. And I'll tell you that if more than 100 listeners are interested in this type of an event, the team's going to begin working to create the experience you want based on the survey results. So this is really listener-directed. It's up to you whether we have this conference, and I do encourage you to go online to www.unity.fm and do the survey. Let us know what you're thinking. That would be a real blessing to us. So I've been saying to you that we always have a choice. And as we continue with Eric's words from the lecture from which these clips are taken, he's going to tell us the same thing, but in a much more eloquent way.
I was talking to a young chap in a hotel one day. He was one of the hotel clerks. There was a lot of people coming in for a convention, and they were harassed, and people were there early, and other people were staying late, and, the usual thing that happens in hotels. And one of them was saying, "Boy, I sure have problems tonight." And one could feel sorry for him. But I talked to one of the other clerks a little later, and he had an entirely different thought. He said, people sure have problems tonight. Both of them dealing with the same experience, one of them dealing with what I call horizontal thought, the other dealing with vertical thought. I have problems, people have problems. But I have problems because of the way I'm reacting to people problems. But if I keep myself in perfect peace, then I'm simply concerned that people have problems, but they're on the outside. Then I can handle them. Then I can deal with them. When was the last time you said, "He makes me so mad," or "That just teased me off"? And of course, this is not correct at all. No one ever makes you mad. No one ever gets you upset. As I say often, you are upset because you're upsettable. You're angry because you have a anger consciousness that is touched like a little red button that causes it to blow up within yourself. But the anger is already within, you see. So you react in thinking according to the level of your attitudes, according to your consciousness. The thing that happens then is we allow our mental mastery to go by default. Some of us are completely unaware of the fact that we have the power to control the kind of thoughts that run rampant in our minds. That's the thing that's fundamental in this study of truth, to realize that it is your mind. Therefore, you have to ask yourself the question from time to time. When you find yourself terribly upset or concerned or anxious or worried about something that's happened, take a good look in yourself and ask yourself this one question. Not why do they do this? Why is the world falling apart? Why do we have so many problems in life? But why do I allow people or experiences or things to determine how I'm going to think or feel or act? This I can do something about. In the same way we tend to succumb to race beliefs, to group psychology, to subliminal suggestion. We're susceptible to the programming of mass media that is designed especially to control and influence thought simply because we've allowed ourselves to react. This is why mass media is so successful. Because of this pattern of reactive thinking, we are led into a life that is not really our own at all. We don't live our lives. We live lives that are conditioned by outside stimuli. But that's because we refuse to accept the responsibility for our own thoughts. So the very first step in this process that we're calling the art of thinking is to know that no matter what happens in your world, no matter what happens out there, no matter what you read in the papers, no matter what is taking place around you or to you, You always have a choice.
You always have a choice. I like the way he slowed down and said that. Do you always have a choice? Yeah, you always have a choice. They cannot take that away from you. And who's they? Well, they is whoever you want they to be. We act according to our own inner consciousness. Eric says it so much better than I can. No one can ever make you mad. You're upset because the anger is already within you. I have a minister friend and colleague who used to say, I can push your buttons because you have buttons to push. Very, very important awareness. The beginning of this clip where the two hotel clerks, one of them says, I have problems, and the other said, people have problems. As a minister, I've had to be present with people in many different kinds of difficult life situations. In the early years of my ministry, I realized I was going home troubled at night because I would be carrying the troubles of a lot of people with me, thinking about them over and over again, even though there was nothing productive I could do. So I learned something that I call the Teflon Prayer. And the Teflon Prayer goes like this: let me be present, really present, to all the people I serve today. Let me hear them not only with my ears, but with their heart, with my heart, rather. Let me respond to them from all the love and wisdom that I am. Let there be blessing, let there be healing, and let me not carry their burdens in my heart. In other words, once we've finished our time together, let me release them and let them go. This is tremendously important. We must recognize that our work is to direct the level of our thought and not get it enmeshed with what's going on with anyone else. When we think reactively, when we get sucked into other people's issues, Eric tells us we are being led into a life that's really not ours at all. We have a choice. We always have a choice. And although we do not manufacture our outer experiences or the outer events in our lives, we do manufacture the way we experience them. Listen to Eric Butterworth call you a manufacturer now.
You always have a choice. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to be unhappy. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to be fearful. You can choose to think positively or creatively if that's the way you want. You can become the master instead of the slave. Oh, it's not easy. Now, let's not kid ourselves. It's not easy to take possession of our mind, to change from being a reflex thinker to a creative thinker. It takes a lot of discipline and will and commitment because we've been thinking in the other way so long. But we can do so. It's not easy to think happiness when you're unhappy, because your unhappiness is busy manufacturing more unhappy thoughts. Tagore comments on this. He says, the slave is busy making whips for his master. So we're busy manufacturing negative thoughts to fulfill the negative state of consciousness, and it goes round and round. It's a vicious cycle. So in a very real sense, it could be said, if someone asks you what your occupation is, if you want to be realistic about it, you could say, I'm a manufacturer. Because I'm always manufacturing the kind of things that happen in my life according to my consciousness. You see, we do this unthinkingly.
Yes, we do. We do it unthinkingly, but the production is always going on. I believe that what Eric is talking about here can be called the Law of Spiritual Inertia. In other words, just like you learned in science class, something in motion tends to continue in motion in the same direction that it's been moving, and something at rest tends to continue at rest. You know for yourself how hard it is to get moving sometimes when you've been stopped for a while. Once you get moving, sometimes it can be difficult to slow down, and certainly changing direction takes a conscious effort on your part. As you think back over the last day or so of your life, you can probably see how you have been manufacturing your experiences one thought at a time. and the thoughts tend to build. If you were manufacturing happy experiences, the happiness increased. But again, if you were enmeshed in fear or in anger, you quickly see how thought by thought you can escalate that anger. And is this something that we want to do? One of my students, and I thought it was original with her, I realized it had been around a long time, I just never heard it, shared with me the idea that the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. I thought that was a brilliant idea, and I thanked her for sharing it with me. So one of the things that we must decide is what problems and challenges we need to deal with and which ones we need to let go. Let's hear Eric tell us more about this now.
It's like the little woman who is the classic story of the woman who was sitting commiserating over a lot of her problems, and she had a lot of problems. She was talking about them, almost counting them one by one like rosary beads. One of her friends, trying to console her, said, "Oh, come on now, things are not that bad. After all, you should try to be positive." And she said, classically, "I don't see it that way. It seems to me when the Lord sends me tribulations, it's my duty to tribulate." Some people seem to feel that you should be unhappy, that you should be negative. If you walk into an office someday smiling and singing and whistling, people say, "What do you have to be so happy about?" But as I say so often, you don't have to have anything to be happy about ever. You can be happy simply because you want to be happy. Abraham Lincoln once said, "A man is about as happy as he makes up his mind to be." This is the key to the positive life. This is the key to positive thinking. It's not filling your mind with a lot of happy platitudes, but it's simply determining that you have control and you can think the kind of thoughts that you want to think, and making the commitment at the beginning of the day and regularly through the day that you're not going to allow people or conditions or circumstances to decide how you're going to think or feel. Just watch the average person read the newspaper. Watch him on a subway sometime. Sometimes we wonder what are you going to do to preoccupy your thoughts on these long subway rides. Be analytical. Watch somebody reading the paper. He'll read a few of the lines, he'll go, "Oh, terrible." And there are a lot of things to tut-tut about, actually, because newspapers like the New York Post have really made tremendous hay on the process that people like to tut-tut. So the point is, that person is simply shoring up in consciousness the fact that he fully believes that it's a terrible world, that everything's going to pot, and so he reads all the things that says, "See, I told you, I told you, I told you." And he's upset because he's upsettable. He's upsettable before he reads the paper. Now, if he wants to make any changes, either changes in the world or changes in himself, he has to begin to ask himself some serious questions. Why do I allow the New York Post or the New York Times or the Daily News? Let's cover all the waterfront so we won't be harsh. Why do we allow these things, these outside stimuli, to determine how I'm going to think? Why do we allow listening to the radio or the television to get me upset? Do I want to be upset? But you've got to be realistic, a person will say. After all, things are in the world, and what are you going to do about them? The fact is, you always have a choice. You always have a choice. You can say, as the hotel clerks did, one of them said, "I have terrible problems." And the other one says, "People have terrible problems." In the one case, the person is totally destroyed by the problems of people. In the other case, the person is there ready to help if he needs to help, but he keeps himself oblivious from it. He's objective, and thus he can serve without being destroyed within himself. And this is a very important realization. And I say this to a person who wants to be a good positive truth student: don't stop reading the paper, certainly. Don't stop listening to the news, unless you find that you do not have as yet the developed capacity to keep the news on the outside. If you don't, then you better not read the news for a while until you keep yourself in perfect peace and develop the capacity to control your own thoughts. Then you can read the news and listen to the news and see what's going on in the world, saying that the world has problems today. But not I have problems, the world has problems. Then suddenly you're in a state of consciousness where you can be a creative asset to the world, but at least you're not going to be destroyed by it.
Ministers and many Unity students proudly proclaim that they don't read the news. And I can understand in some situations why they don't. I don't agree with that idea unless, of course, I find myself in a fragile condition where I'm sort of like the cottage cheese in the refrigerator, It'll take on the taste or the aroma of anything that happens to be near it. If I'm in that kind of a fragile condition, perhaps I need to stop listening to the news or reading the news for a while. But really, it all comes back to this idea that's introduced in the first chapter of the Bible. I have dominion. In this particular lecture, we see some of Eric's rare humor. This lecture, I believe, comes from the early 1980s, and Eric was definitely in his prime. Don't you love the story about the woman who says it's her duty to tribulate? Oh, my goodness. This whole idea of guilt, I don't dare be happy. I remember so many times when difficult things were going on in the world, or even closer to home in the life of my family or the life of my friends. When I was just a boy and my grandfather died, it seemed almost a guilty thing to have any kind of a Christmas observation at all that year. And then I realized, well, just because somebody left this planet, there's no reason to tribulate. We'll be back with more of our discussion right after these messages.
Unity has designated 2011 as the Year of Abundant Living and has created a resource library to support you as you embrace your abundance. Hi, this is Reverend Robin Ryder, Senior Minister of Sacred Abundance Ministries and host of Sacred Abundance on Unity Online Radio. Are you looking for abundance in your finances, health, or relationships? Unity's resource library has a variety of tools to support you. Affirmations, articles, podcasts, books, and more. Everything you need to live your life abundantly. Join Unity for this year-long journey of abundance. Go to www.unity.org and click on the Abundant Living Resource Center. And of course, you can also tune in each week for my program, Sacred Abundance, as we learn and apply the essential spiritual principles to our real-world experiences. Join me on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together we are unity.
Now, back to Discovering Eric Butterworth with Reverend Tom Thorpe.
Welcome back to the third and final segment of this edition of Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. That last break caught me by surprise. I was very deep into my reflection there with you, and I didn't see Jeff's signal, so we just sort of went away. And I believe my last words were something about, do we have a duty to tribulate? I still love that image. And of course we don't. Abraham Lincoln, that was one of the quotes I remember looking up in ministerial school, and Lord knows I might even have gotten that from Eric. Abraham Lincoln said, most people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. Now, this comes from a man who we know had difficulties with depression through most of his life. He realized that really it's the individual's choice. We cannot determine the circumstances of our lives, but we can always determine how we will respond to them. And this is so important. We don't need anything to be happy about. We can just decide to be happy. I have understood that in some parts of the world, I'm not exactly sure where at the moment, there are organizations called laughing clubs. People will get together in a public place like a park, whenever they decide to do it, whether it's daily or weekly or whatever, and they'll just laugh. I mean, it won't be people telling jokes or reading funny stories. People will just begin to laugh because they believe laughing is good for you. Now, I don't know if I advocate something like that, but I do advocate looking for ways to rejoice in this beautiful world we inhabit. And yes, it is a beautiful world when we make it beautiful. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Missoula, Montana. I was there for a weekend with the board and volunteers from the church, and on Sunday, the whole congregation. It was Palm Sunday, and we had a joyous service. There was wonderful music, including a beautiful solo. The youth education director gave a really inspiring message to the kids, and I enjoyed the opportunity to present the talk and the meditation. And at the end, I realized that the congregation and I had made church together. Yeah, we did. And it was joyous. Now, it was joyous for me. I hope it was joyous for them. Somebody might have had a complaint about my talk or about the music or about how hard their seat was or God knows what. But the opportunity to rejoice was definitely there. I saw it. I felt it. So, do we want to feel that positive energy, or do we have a desire to, as Eric said, tut-tut? And he really went after the New York Post there. I found that kind of funny. It's really our choice. That's what it's going to be in every situation. Remember, as I said with my comments about the Teflon Prayer, I want to be ready to help if I need to be help. If I need to help, if someone needs my help. But I also don't want to take their problems into my consciousness, because that is the way to get me off balance and eventually to get me deep into trouble. Now, Eric tells us that we have the ability to shape intelligence. This is our last audio for this broadcast, so let's listen to it.
So the great need is for a discovery of oneself as a thinking center within the infinite mind of God. Divine mind, essentially, is your milieu. This is important. You're in it, all the time. It is impossible that you should ever have a mind apart from divine mind. All you have is a consciousness within divine mind. Your mind is not separate from mind. Quite often people say, well, I'm praying so that I can get into divine mind. There's no way that you can ever get into divine mind, because there's no way you can ever get out of it. You are a thinking center within divine mind, you see. You are a consciousness within it. But you see, the intelligence that is in back of all thought is the intelligence that runs the universe. The intelligence that is in back of all thought. And right away we say, now wait a minute, what about negative thoughts? There's one intelligence. I use this illustration in my book, Unity of All Life, as some of you probably have read. We direct this intelligence into the moods of our consciousness, into the molds of human awareness, like the limitless air that we force into balloons of various sizes and shapes. It's the same air, but through our selection we fill any size and shape that we wish. In the same way, we can permit the creativity of the universe to flow into a mold of twisted and distorted thought, and by the same law that would manifest perfection in accord with a perfect mental mold, it will manifest distortion in accordance with our distorted mental state. Now this is a very important realization. You see, there's only one basic intelligence. We distort it and pervert it according to where we are in consciousness. And because we're creatures of habit, we tend to habitually blow air into certain balloons simply because that's what we've always done. So we have certain tendencies to think of ourselves as being too old, or perhaps too young. We think of ourselves in certain habit patterns of sickness, of poverty, of war, and all the various things that beset human consciousness. All of these are the habit patterns of human mind. Quite often we think of it in terms of bad luck. And it's so important to understand that what we call bad luck is simply a bad mental habit. The bad mental habit. Where I say, well, things like that always happen to me. What are you going to do? Well, you can always do something. You may not be able to immediately change the conditions, but you can change what you do about them, how you react to them, what you think about them. You can always be creative. You can always be positive regardless of conditions. In other words, tune yourself into an entirely different dimension.
Tune yourself into an entirely different dimension. Isn't that interesting? It reminds me that we can never solve life's problems at the level of the problem. We have to raise our consciousness and get a broader view. Now, let's go back through what Eric told us there. There's some powerful stuff. Your mind and my mind are both points of consciousness within divine mind. In other words, divine mind is not something apart from you, apart from me. It's where we live. It's who we are. As Eric says, I can't get into divine mind because I can never get out of divine mind. And then he tells us the intelligence behind all thought, whether that thought is positive or negative, is the intelligence that runs the universe. Intelligence does not especially resist being used in any way that we choose to use it. Remember, we are executive directors. We can use divine intelligence to create beautiful circumstances for ourselves, or we can use it, as Eric says, to create twisted, warped circumstances for ourselves. We direct this intelligence, like he says, like forcing air into different sized balloons. As he talks about intelligence, it's very much like divine substance. And really, all of the words that we use are our attempts to describe the activity of the One, the activity of God, if you will. That energy that we can experience, that we can work with, but we can't really define because it's beyond our limited human understanding, beyond our complete understanding. We do understand it, though, quite well enough to work with it, and to work with it very, very productively if that's what we choose to do. But let's go back again to this idea of spiritual inertia. Eric tells us we're all creatures of habit, and so we are. We tend to do what we've always been doing. And if we're going to change what we've always been doing, we need to take some proactive steps. And I believe that the first of these proactive steps is to recognize what's going on. Eric has told us several times during the audio clips we've listened to today to not ask the question, why are they doing this to me, but why am I creating these circumstances in mind? It's because of a habit, and the habit is fueled by a belief that we're holding somewhere in consciousness. It may be a hidden belief. So the first thing we need to do is at least recognize what we're doing that we wish to change. Perhaps if we can dialogue with that belief most deeply, or dialogue with the practice, what's causing this, we might get at the root belief and be able to work with that. The next thing we need to do is to take our denial step, our releasing step. So first we recognize, and then we release. If, for example, I am always late to work, or I make it so much in the nick of time that I'm never comfortable walking into the office. I always feel like I'm sneaking in. Well, what's going on there? Obviously, I'm not using my time wisely enough to get there with a comfortable margin. Is it because, I don't know, maybe I don't feel I have the right to be there. Maybe I don't feel like I belong in such a fine organization. Or maybe I feel, on the converse of that the organization is treating me poorly and that I don't want to be there. And this is doing things, it's causing beliefs and mental conversation that sabotages my attempts to get to work on time. So you see, we recognize what's going on. I'm not getting to work on time. We release whatever beliefs might be holding us back. And at the top level, at the surface level, we can say, I no longer need to be late to work. If we can go deeper than this, we may be able to, we may not be able to. If we can go deeper than this, we might address some of the beliefs. We might address the belief of worthiness, or we might address the belief of whether the organization is treating us properly. But we don't need to go that far at the beginning. All we need to do is to work with what we can see. The third step is redirect. So we recognize, we release, and we redirect. Once I've made in mind the commitment to be to work on time, I redirect my energy to get me there. What do I do? Well, probably I get up a little bit earlier. Maybe I'll lay out my clothes for the day the night before. I might have things ready for breakfast. There's all kinds of things that I can do. I recognize my situation better than anybody, and I can tell where the bottlenecks are, so I have a lot of power here. I can make up my mind and set a course of action that will allow me to change. But then, of course, I have to do it. I have to follow the steps that I've set out for myself, and that's where it can get most difficult. Because, you see, the inertia, the old habits, have a pull on us. They have this pull because they are well established in consciousness, you see. They're so established in consciousness that they think they are us, these habits. And in our next program, we'll be talking about how you are not what you think. So we have the right to make changes, but we also need to remember that we need to use will and strength to make these changes. And so once I've recognized what I want to do, once I have released the energy that was holding me back, and once I have redirected that energy in positive ways by knowing I can be to work on time, and to be to work on time, I will do this, this, and this, all of which are possible for me to do. I need to repeat. I need to repeat that. I need to repeat that commitment every day. Jeff just showed me a new toy. He's got a way to create an impromptu sign right on his iPad. Jeff's a very creative guy. So let's look at that again. Recognize. I recognize that there's something going on in my life, whether it's the example of not getting to work on time or anything else. I want to change this. I want to take charge. I want to use my executive ability. So I release the hold that this negativity has over me. I no longer accept the statement that I can't get to work on time. I know that I can. I release the barrier. And then I redirect my energy, not just in words, but in actions. I do the kinds of things that will bring my desired idea into manifestation. I think positively. I know I'm going to be to work on time. Will I succeed right away? Well, that's going to depend on how carefully I follow the steps and how carefully I follow the plan. The temptation to hit the snooze button, it's going to be strong. And every day I have a fresh opportunity to do what I've decided to do. We'll continue our discussion of thinking in the next episode of Discovering Eric Butterworth on Unity Online Radio. I hope to hear from you at discoverbutterworth@unity.fm with your experiences. Thank you so much for listening today. Namaskar.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together.
Thank you for tuning in to Discovering Eric Butterworth with Reverend Tom Thorpe. Join us every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Central Time for more insights into Eric Butterworth's powerful truth message and how you can apply it to your life today. This program is brought to you in part by Unity Institute Spiritual Education and Enrichment. Make SEE your gateway to spiritual enlightenment. Online at www.unity.org untitled.com/education/SEE. Discovering Eric Butterworth, only on Unity FM, the voice of an awakening world.
I'm one with you, you're one with me, together we are unity.
Jesus taught us that it is our divine Creator's great pleasure to give us the kingdom of limitless good. We are all heirs to incredible abundance, and yet many people right now are stuck and struggling in a place of lack. How do we walk the walk and experience vibrant health, profound love, limitless wealth, and overflowing joy in the midst of a world consciousness of lack and separation? Each week, you will learn powerful and practical tools to experience greater abundance in every area of your life. Hear from experts and visionaries that are living examples of sacred abundance, and have your questions about prosperity answered from a spiritual perspective. Join Reverend Robin Ryder live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central Time on Sacred Abundance, only on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
In quiet moments of prayer, let go of any concern. Anchor your trust deep in the realization that with God all things are possible. Never doubt it for a single moment.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.
You have a good life and are grateful for it. But what if you stretched beyond good and shifted to amazing? Join Reverend Temple Hayes, Senior Minister of the First Unity Campus in St. Petersburg, Florida, as she guides you on a journey to an amazing life. Transcend the need for acceptance of others and be an example of living the truth. Empower your life and fully express the wondrous energy, love, and joy you hold in your wildest imagining. Joyfully and actively know that more important than what happens after you die is the deeper and enriching concern for what happens while you're living. How can you experience an amazing life right now? Learn how each week on From Good to Amazing. Mondays at 4 p.m. Central Time, right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Inspiration only takes a moment. Take a moment now to reflect on these words from Reverend Joan Gattuso. According to an ancient Hindu teaching, if you can only speak the truth and tell no lies, either minuscule or outrageous, for 12 consecutive years, you can attain enlightenment. A noble being will always tell the truth. Do you? Begin now with the first step of simply noticing if you do tell the truth immediately, or if your first instinct is to alter the facts a bit. Resolve to be honest with yourself and others starting today. And after 4,383 days, you just may become enlightened.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.
There is peace. There is quiet.
Reverend Paulette's mantra is, "It's all a prayer." Tune in every Tuesday as Unity Minister Paulette Pipe leads you in meditation and prayer on Touching the Stillness. Make no mistake, this is not nap time. With an energy that will captivate you, Touching the Stillness will guide you in deep meditation, leaving you enlivened. Hear astounding meditations and learn more about different forms of meditation. Enrich your prayer life as Reverend Paulette, Senior Minister of Touching the Stillness Ministries, affirmatively prays with power and authority by taking live prayer requests from callers like you. Whether you have a prayer request for yourself or for a loved one or are ready for a deepened meditation experience, make sure you tune in on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. Central Time, where we'll be joining in consciousness with the unceasing prayer activity of the Silent Unity 24/7 Prayer Ministry at Unity Village. That's Touching the Stillness with Reverend Paulette Pipe every Tuesday right here on Unity Online Radio, the voice of an awakening world.
Letting go in the stillness.
Inspiration only takes a moment. Take a moment now to reflect on this message from Daily Word. Is something in your life causing you concern? Don't be discouraged. The presence of God is peace and harmony, healing and creative ideas, is with you every moment of every day, providing the help you need. In quiet moments of prayer, let go of any concern. Anchor your trust deep in the realization that with God all things are possible. Never doubt it for a single moment. You are a spiritual being, blessed with all that you need for happiness and fulfillment. God's wisdom will guide you. God's strength will help you do all that you need to do. And God's joy will lighten your heart with hope and courage.
This meditative moment is brought to you by Unity.